Okay, so it's been a few days since I recorded the episode reaction for episode 4 of Hazbin Hotel. In fact, I've recorded episode 5 already. But I've gone back and watched it again, and there's a few things on my mind that I wanna add that I feel like if I hadn't been distracted during my recording of episode 4, I probably would have brought up. Um which cuz I think I said during the recording of the episode 4 is I've never had to survive abuse, right? Like I've never been in that position, but I've been close to people. I am close to people who have been in that position, and I've been close to someone who was was undergoing, was in the middle of an abusive situation, and I've been in the position of being on the outside and be feeling rather powerless to do anything to help them. So episode 4, the depiction of abuse that was present there, it dredged some things up. I've been Charlie in that situation, essentially. Not, I hope not quite as oblivious to what was going on, but I've been in the position of trying to confront someone who was abusing a friend of mine, and then having my friend step in front of me and say, "Back the fuck off! Don't interfere! Don't do anything! You're just gonna make it worse!" Right? And that's so it dredged up some feelings for me, right? And it rather distracted me. For the duration of the recording. So there was a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. And the first one is a critique. And it's not really a critique of Hazbin Hotel specifically, right? It's not, oh, this show is doing something wrong or doing something bad, but rather a critique of a broader trope that exists in media when it comes to the depiction of sex work and sex workers, which is the trope of the I guess you'd call it the abused whore, right? Of the traumatized, abused sex worker who is only in sex work because they are traumatized and abused, right? And which equates visually the abuse that the sex worker is under, the traumatized nature of the abuse that the sex worker is undergoing with sex work itself as a concept. And that's very much something that Hazbin Hotel indulges in. Especially the Poison music video draws a very, very, very explicit connection between BDSM gear and sex and sex work and all of this, and the abuse that Valentino is doing to Angel, right? Visually speaking, the BDSM gear, the submissiveness, the sex and sexuality is used as a metaphor for the abuse that Valentino is doing, right? A very direct, explicit connection. And number one, that's a valid story to tell. Because this is the thing about BDSM, it is the visual language of humiliation, submission, domination. It is a visual language that relates to that. So it's a valid thing to use it for. It's just, it also just plays into some unhelpful tropes. Because although a lot of people would prefer that it isn't so, kink and queerness are inherently connected. For the simple reason that in the eyes of homophobes, all forms of queerness is kink, right? In the eyes of people who are transphobic, homophobic, whatever, there is no meaningful way to distinguish sexuality, non-normative gender expressions from pornography, from kink, from perversion, right? In the eyes of a homophobe, two happily married, gay men with a picket fence and a little White House and 1.4 children and a dog and a safe job in a consultancy firm on Wall Street, and all of the trappings and everything that goes along with the nuclear family, moral majority, family values, middle American life, two gay men who never have sex with the lights on and only had sex on their wedding. It doesn't matter. If two gay men kiss in front of a homophobic conservative, that's porn. That is pornography. That's an attempt to corrupt the children. That's something that's inappropriate. That oh God, decent people shouldn't be exposed to this. And we can see that happening right now in the groomer discourse that the American right wing is engaging very heavily in, which is slowly being exported all across the Western world by the right wing, which is seizing on this as a wedge issue that they can use to push back against civil rights as a concept. Is this idea that the existence of trans people, just the presence of trans people in the world, is a form of sexual grooming of children, right? It's a form of perversion. to have trans people exist. And I'm old enough, like, I remember in the 90s when we had the panic about gay teachers. Like, oh, gay, you can't have a gay teacher in the what if they're in gym and they, like, there's going to be children and we can't trust them because, like, being gay, like, just the simple concept of being gay was equated with being sexually predatory, right? And kink has been a part of pride, as, like, queer pride, gay pride, for a very long time for this exact reason, because they are both, like, because there is no way to be queer that isn't conceptualized in the mind of the conservative as a form of kink, as a form of sexual perversion, as a form of filthy hedonism, right? So there is a problematic aspect to drawing the connection so explicitly between kink, sexual submission, and gay sex, for that matter, with Angel as a character and abuse from Valentino, right? Like that the kink and the sex and the submission is an aspect of being abused. Like, there's a problematic aspect to that. And again, this is not a critique specifically of Hazbin Hotel. This is not me trying to cancel Hazbin Hotel and say, oh, Vivzy Pop, homophobic, whatever. It is not that. What I'm pointing out is that there is a broader context that exists, and it is something which Hazbin Hotel doesn't really account for, right? Like, this is a broader context that is absent from Hazbin Hotel. And one of the ways that you can counteract that, like, one of the ways in which inside of a story like Hazbin Hotel, you can counteract that problematic aspect is simply by showing healthy alternatives. Like, yes, Angel is being abused, right? And there is abuse happening at the porn industries in hell, which, again, narratively speaking, a fairly reasonable thing to have happen is that the porn industry in hell is abusive, sure, but that kink and bondage and submission and queerness and pornography and sex work exist as things that aren't ontologically evil, right? Like, that aren't ontologically abusive, that aren't ontologically associated with abuse and self-hate and shame and misery and pain. And I think the show has tried that a little bit. Like, there was the scene in the very first episode with Charlie where she, like, walks past and you've got two people in, like, leather gear fucking inside of a window, which is presented very neutrally. And there was the time that Angel took people to the BDSM club, and, like, that all seemed to be above board. But it's like, but the show against that very, very explicitly draws this comparison, right? Like, draws this thing of like this is what someone who's being abused looks like, right? Like, this is what abuse looks like in the visual language of Hazbin Hotel, is this, right? And again, none of this is to say that I don't like the episode. I think as I commented on during my initial reaction, is I thought it was very well handled for what it is. I think it struck a very careful balance of showing that the abuse is not erotic, right? Like, that it's not, that this is not hot, but what Angel is doing with it, like, the way that he's trying to survive it, the way that he's trying to get through it, is by adopting the Angel Dust persona and sort of trying to, okay, well, fine, then, like, if I'm going to survive this, then embrace it hedonistically, let it destroy me, and then when I am destroyed, then I'll be free of it, right? Like, which again that's not at all, I think, unrealistic to the ways that some victims of abuse can react to the circumstances of their abuse. I think he's a very well-written character. I think he's a very compelling character. Like, obviously it fucking affected me deeply. Deeply it affected me. Like, it really fucking got to me. But I did just want to put that out there, that, like, it is problematic, which is not to say that it's evil or that it's homophobic or that it's morally wrong, but it is problematic to have that equation between sex work and abuse, and between kink and queerness, in, like, this version of kink and queerness and abuse. Like, those direct links are problematic, and within the text of a story, probably care should be taken not to imply that those associations are ontological, that those associations are inherent, right? Care should be taken to go, no, this is the tool that Valentino is using in this specific case of abuse, it is not the general nature of abuse that looks like that. And it's like, I also want to recognize that's a fucking hard circle to square. Like, that's a difficult circle to square. And it seems to me that the creators of Hazbin Hotel are sort of trusting the audience to understand this. Certainly I understand that, right? I'm sitting here talking about it. I understand that, like, that this is the very specific abuse of in a specific case, but the text itself does not really clarify that. And I think that is a relevant point of criticism. Like, I saw someone talked to me about how a sex worker had done a reaction to this specific episode and had been quite disappointed to see that once again, like, the sex worker character in the show is, oh, they're an abuse victim. Once again, the sex worker is this abused, beaten victim who's only in sex work because they're being abused, right? And that's also another trope. Like, that's the thing. One thing I've talked about a lot in my reactions so far is this hypocritical distinction that culture tends to draw between sex and ultraviolence, where ultraviolence is deemed like the more wholesome, family-friendly, and acceptable form of expression. And then sex and sexuality is like, oh, this is gross. This is too disgusting. And that's an attitude that pervades to the point of, like, if someone is in dire economic circumstances, like really is fucked up, they're on their last legs, they're looking for some form of like, maybe they have a severe, like, substance abuse problem, maybe they have a severe disability that means they can't work, like, maybe they're in some kind of dire economic circumstances, and they take up sex work. Like, they end up there, they're forced into sex work as their only option for any chance at a better life. We have a tendency to moralize against that very strongly. We have a tendency to consider that a kind of special moral horror, and sort of go, oh god, that's just the most terrible thing I can ever imagine having happened to me. But if someone in dire economic circumstances, who's on their last legs, who has basically no way out of poverty, and who has only one option for escaping it, enters the military, we don't really treat that with the same kind of moral horror, do we? Even though what they're doing essentially is they're signing away their life for years to go to a training camp where they're trained to kill other human beings and subjected to truly horrifying working conditions. Like, just the stories, like, I'm not just thinking of the American military, I'm thinking of my own, like, the domestic military way in here, of people who get deployed and exposed to some of the most horrifying trauma that a human being can be exposed to, forced to kill other human beings in service to their country, and then they get home and they're just dumped into society without support, without without mental health support, without material support, without, if they are disabled, if they get shot, if they get injured, they just sort of get dumped, and then they have to go and beg for their lives to the government to get the kind of mental health support and physical rehabilitation and support that they need in order to live. Like, look at the way that I know some American veterans, and I've heard some fucking horror stories about what's happened to their friends. Like, the suicide rate among veterans is off the fucking charts. But we don't moralize that the same way, do we? Even though the same exact circumstances can compel someone to enter the military, that can compel someone to enter sex work. Well, sex work, that's a special category of bad, right? And it can lead to some really infantilizing views of sex workers. Like, that sex workers are these poor, abused wretches who, like, have only entered this uniquely degrading industry and this uniquely degrading situation because, because they're victims of abuse. So they're, there's some kind of, and it can lead to this very savioristic approach to sex work. This is something we do in my country, for example. We operate on a legal framework for sex work that's called the Nordic model, which is sold on the language of, oh, this is a means to support sex workers to get them out of that terrible industry, right? Like, it's a legal framework that operates on the assumption that everyone who's in sex work should not be in sex work, right? Like, and that people don't have the right to really choose to enter sex work, and the only possible reason why anyone could possibly be in sex work is because they are abused or forced into it. And so, from a legal perspective, like, what society must do is make it unprofitable, right? Like, is to to make it impossible to make money doing sex work, rather than ameliorating the conditions of life that cause people to seek out sex work as an escape in the first place, right? Like, rather than do something to address poverty, rather than do something to better support people with disabilities, with severe drug addiction, with severe substance abuse problems, rather than doing anything to address deep poverty and social stratification and the impossibility of escaping poverty once you're in. Oh, we'll just make it impossible for people to make money doing this one specific form of degrading labor. But if they want to go be migrant workers and work for 14 hours a day in the scorching fucking heat with not a single break and get break their backs and get severe lifelong injuries from doing backbreaking labor in an Amazon warehouse, oh, that's fine. I mean, that's them pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. That's just good old-fashioned hard labor. That's not degrading at all. That's not a horrible thing to do to another human being's body for money, to force them to lift heavy things until their bones crack. Nah, but fucking someone, oh, that's uniquely bad, right? And none of this is to say that sex work can't be degrading, or that sex work can't be terribly damaging, or that there isn't abuse happening in the sex industry. There absolutely is. But that we have this perverse hypocrisy wherein we consider sex work as this unique category, like this special moral hazard that's separate from all other forms of labor, from all other forms of work. This one is like the special bad one, which is especially bad and which must be treated like with a special kind of paternalistic pity and moral revulsion that we would never, ever apply to any other form of labor, no matter how horrible it is. Again, see the distinction between sex and ultraviolence. Which one is more wholesome and family-friendly? Well, it's a lot more wholesome and family-friendly to be a soldier who gets sent overseas to one of the forever wars to murder foreigners in a country that they've never really heard of for reasons that aren't really explained to them. That's wholesome. That's just good American patriotism. But doing sex work, oh, gross, disgusting, filthy, ew, you're damaged goods. You are a ruined person, and that's we need to put you in a church camp of some kind or something to cleanse your soul of the taint of this filth, right? And where I was going with all of this is again, this was a long rant. Again, it is not a criticism of Hazbin Hotel specifically. It is a criticism of this trope, of these cultural attitudes in general, and what I'm pointing out is that those tropes, some of those attitudes seem to be present in Hazbin Hotel's storytelling, and it's problematic. Again, I really liked episode, I don't know, I didn't enjoy it as such, in that, well, I enjoyed Loser Baby a lot. We'll talk about that in a second. I enjoyed it. I think it's a good story. I think it's well told. I think Angel Dust is a really compelling character. I'm not here saying that the things that happened to Angel Dust never happen in real life, because they do. These kinds of things happen. This kind of abuse is done. It is a feature of reality. But that this story, this depiction exists within the context of a larger world where there are problematic aspects to indulging in these tropes without visibly deconstructing them. And I should say, I haven't watched the whole show. There's a few episodes left. Maybe the show will take those steps and go, no, where Angel Dust has a scene where it's no, I like doing sex work. I really like it. I very much enjoy fucking. This is a good time for me. I'm doing that because I want to do it, but I don't want to do it for Valentino, right? That would be nice if there was this little moment of rather than Angel Dust, a little reclamation of agency, right? Where Angel Dust is no, I do have power over my own life, and I made my own decisions. It's just that motherfucking asshole needs to be removed from my world, right? So that the blame is placed on Valentino, so that it's specifically about, no, Valentino's a piece of shit. The industry is fine, right? Because the sex workers that I know, the stories that they have of trying to find support from anyone who's not a sex worker, for them, if they have a problem, right? This is one of the consequences of the Nordic model in Scandinavia, where I live, is that because profiting from sex work is illegal, that means that anyone who houses a sex worker who sees clients in their apartment, any landlord who houses a sex worker, could be prosecuted for pimping like for profiting off the proceeds of sex work, which means that every single landlord in the country is terrified of allowing a sex worker into their housing. They won't, like, if anyone is known to be a sex worker, if anyone is known to do prostitution, they can lose their home because their landlord will do everything in their power to get them the fuck out before the landlord gets prosecuted for charging them rent for the place that they live, right? The same thing if a sex worker goes to the police because they've had a client who was abusive to them, who hurt them, who did to them what Valentino's doing to Angel Dust. Do you know what the police can and often will do? They confiscate all of the sex workers' money as proceeds from prostitution. If a friend agrees to show up to the sex worker's flat and be like, hey, if something goes wrong, I'm going to yell and I need you to come help me. Like, just a friend, not even paid. That friend can be charged as an accessory to sex work. And if like the level to which the state can use that power to make it impossible for sex workers to live without offering them, because they don't ameliorate the conditions that drive people into sex work, because they don't deal with the problems that come from disability, because they don't make the world more livable for people with severe substance abuse problems, because they don't make the world, make it more possible for someone to get by in the world if they can't be a part of the normal capitalistic workforce. They don't remove any of the conditions that force people to do sex work because no other options are available. They just make doing sex work even harder and more degrading, right? It's... I don't... How did I get onto that tangent? I don't remember. But it's like... My point being, there are some problematic aspects to the depiction of Angel Dust in Hazbin Hotel. Like, that's the point I wanted to get to. Some aspects of this are problematic. There isn't really a way to tell a story about abuse that isn't problematic, I think. There isn't really a way to tell a story that isn't problematic. Everything on some level is problematic, right? All stories are on some level problematic. And our job is not to, try and purge all problematic fiction from the world. Because we can't, first of all. And second of all, because that's what the fucking Nazis tried to do. Our job isn't to try and purge everything that's problematic from the world, but to understand the aspects of the media that we love that are problematic, to understand why they're problematic, and to therefore not adopt any negative attitudes, or try at the very least not to adopt the problematic aspects of the fiction into our own thinking, right? The reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want someone to watch this episode of Hazbin Hotel, who's also been watching my reactions, and come away with the impression that, oh, right, this is because sex work and BDSM is inherently kind of connected to abuse. Because they are not, right? I don't want anyone to come away with the attitude that, oh, people are in sex work because they're traumatized and they're broken and because they're forced into it and for no other reason. Because, no, that's simply not the truth. Lots of people make the decision to get into sex work, not because it's their dream job or because it's the thing they've always wanted to do with their life, but because it's the thing that suits their economic circumstances and their material conditions at the time, right? And if we want to be able to live in solidarity with sex workers, if we want to help them with their struggles, if you want to make sure that nobody who doesn't want to ever ends up doing sex work, that has to start from an understanding of why someone would make a consensual, conscious decision to enter sex work in the first place. And it has to come from a position of not moralizing that thing as something that's inherently more hazardous or evil or gross or disgusting than any other form of abusive labor, because abuse is inherent to labor under capitalism. It's inherent to it. For example, Valentino's character design, right? As I commented on the first time he showed up on screen, let's see if we can find a shot where he's in. He's designed as a pimp, right? He's designed as sort of this 90s image of the stereotypical street pimp kind of thing. That's where his character design is drawn from, right? And he sits at the head of this porn production operation where he abuses his workers, he steals from them, he uses their bodies in order to generate profits from himself that he then pockets, even though they're the ones whose labor generates that profit. That is also, it should be said, that's the condition for every company that you have ever worked for in your life. Every company you've ever worked for in your life, you work and you generate more value then the owner of the company pays you for your labor. Those are the basic conditions of life under capitalism, because that's the only way to make a profit, is to pay the workers less than the value that they generate. You have to be able to pocket that profit, otherwise capitalism doesn't work. So, like, every boss you've ever had is your pimp in that sense. Every boss you've ever had exploits your body, your physical labor, for their own benefit, right? And that could be a very powerful critique of capitalism in and of itself, but what we get, what the visual coding, what the semiotics and the rhetoric of Hazbin Hotel is that no, this is the sex industry specifically, right? Where it would be really cool, I think it would be lovely if they drew that out just a little bit further and said, no, this is labor. This is what labor is like in general, is that there's someone on top who reaps the benefits of, like, the exertions of other people's bodies and the destruction of other people's bodies for themselves. Like, that's just what labor is like under capitalism. That would be cool. But yeah, that was my critique, right? That was the criticism. Put that to one side. Now let's talk about some fucking compliments. Like, the Poison music video is, like, I have my problems with it, obviously. It's also really fucking good. Like, as a piece of choreography, as a piece of short form storytelling, this is really fucking strong. Like the especially in the character design and, like, well, not the character design, the animation of Angel Dust, like the moments that you see him switch, right? Like the moments that you see him swap from, like, his pain and his discomfort and his hatred of the situation he's in, and then he puts on the Angel Dust persona, and you get the grin, and you get, like, the bratty energy, and, like, you can see how he has to swap into that version of himself in order to cope with what's going on, in order to deal with the pain that he's being put through, right? Like, you get these swaps in his personality that are just, like, very well done. His character animation is extremely well handled. He has so many fucking limbs, right? His character design is extremely well handled. The choreography is extremely well handled. The song is a bit of a banger. I've listened to it a few times now. Because it takes us inside Angel Dust's head, right? Like, he you can hear in the language that he uses that so much of what he's saying is self-blame, right? Like, he's so in his own, like this is my fault. I made my choices, right? I'm addicted to you. That's why I can't leave. It's because I'm addicted to you. When the visuals show us very explicitly that no, the reason you can't leave is because you're a prisoner. He has imprisoned you. He's using you as slave labor. But Angel Dust's rhetoric, like the way that he has to think about himself, the way that he has to think about what's happening, is that no, this is I'm doing my plan, right? Like, I'm gonna ruin myself so hard that he doesn't want me anymore, and then I'll be free, right? Like, because he's trying desperately to find some form of agency over himself, over his own body, over what happens to him. Just anything that'll let him cope, right? Like, that's why he has that severe drug addiction, that severe drug dependency, is because, well, I mean, that's a way to not feel the misery and suffering of what you're going through, is to indulge in substances, right? Which, again, is like, that is, again, something I've talked about, I think, in a previous reaction, is that's not untrue to how people end up in substance abuse problems. Like, it's not because they're morally weak. It's not because, like, people don't end up with substance abuse problems because they have some kind of flaw in their moral character. They end up in substance abuse problems most of the time because those substances do something material for them that they need, that allows them to cope with some kind of pain. Like, a lot of people who have chronic pain end up with addictions to painkillers, and then that can progress into addictions to, like, more severe forms of opiates. Because they are in pain, because they need some way to deal with the fucking physical pain they're in. Same thing for emotional pain, same thing for mental pain. It's like, people can be in situations where the only thing that offers them just a fucking moment of relief from the hurt and the suffering that they're going through is, well, like, substances, drugs. So that, like, I think is, from a point of view of characterizing Angel, why he is the way he is, why he does the things he does, yeah, like, it's good, strong characterization. Like, the hitting the high note at the same time as he sort of cries out in pain from like some sexual abuse that's being done to him, is like, that is fucking strong visual imagery. I think it is a really good music video. I wanted to call that out. The other thing I wanted to call out, this is something I saw someone on TikTok originally point this out, but Angel Dust's reaction to physical contact, which happens during I'm a Loser. Let's see if we can find the specific moment, because there's a couple of times when Husk invites him to dance, right? And Angel Dust has a particular reaction to those things, which I wanted to see if I can't find. This is a little bit difficult to do it this way. I should probably put this in. Yeah, here we go. I should probably have put this in my fucking Adobe Premiere Pro or something. And I need to be real careful about how much footage I play here, because playing even a little bit too much can get me a copyright claim here. Like here, Husk offers Angel Dust his hand, right? And you can see, at first, disdain, right? Oh, he's offering, because Angel Dust's relationship to physical contact, to physical intimacy of any kind, and dancing is a form of intimacy, let's be clear about this, is distrust, right? Like, his only understanding of why someone would want contact with him, why someone would want to touch him, why someone would want to be around him, be near him, is because they want something from him. Right, like that's his primary understanding of why would anyone want to be around me? Why would anyone want to touch my body? It's because they want something from me. They want sex. They want like validation. They want pleasure, and therefore my only option as a person is to get something out of them as well, like to chase the hedonism of that. Because that this is transactional. It'll always be transactional. Transaction is the only form of physical intimacy I understand, and then here, like Husk takes his hands and just dances with him, and you can see Angel doesn't know. It's like, wait, what? What's happening? Like, Husk is offering him a form of friendly platonic intimacy without asking anything from him, right? Except that, hey, dance along, right? And it's a form of contact that Angel doesn't really understand. Like, you can see that he's confused by it, that this is I don't know how to be. I don't know what to do with my body in this situation. And there's this confusion, and this is when Angel does, like, this is when you hear the first two verses that he sings, right? The first bit is like, I sold my soul to a psychopathic freak, like dig, like coke, addle, dick, sucking. While he's in his lower register, he's kind of using a slightly rough voice. He's not singing very prettily because he's still uncertain, because he doesn't understand what's going on. And then once he sort of begins to understand, oh, this is not a transaction, this is solidarity. Like, Husk isn't asking me to give him anything. He's just asking me to be here with him and to share our despair, to be in the hole together, right? To be in the shit together. That's when he swaps up into his higher register and begins singing beautifully, right? Like, contrasting Husk's, like Keith David's more specifically, like low baritone with his high tenor. And that's just from an instrumentation and a musical perspective, that's really fucking well done. I really like that. Right? And you see that there, like Angel Dust insults himself, right? It's fine to be a coked up dick-sucking hoe. Baby, that's fine by me. And then, like, he perks up, right? It's like, yeah, sure. You are fucked up. You're, like, you fucked up a bunch of shit. That's fine. You can be that. That's a thing you're allowed to be. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be Angel Dust. You don't have to be glamorous. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be powerful. You don't have to be anything. You can just be whatever the fuck you are. And baby, that's fine by me. Right? And you can see that really perks him the fuck up, because now he starts singing, right? Now he starts using his voice, like expressing himself. His body language opens up. He starts moving more freely. He starts dancing more freely. And that's just like from a perspective of choreography, instrumentation, lyricism, that's a beautiful way to tell that story. I really, really, really like it. There's another moment. where Husk and Angel dance. And it's a little bit later on from this. But just maybe if we eat shit together, we can end up differently. Angel offers his hand here, right? Husk takes it, and Angel kind of goes, oh, like, because he's not used to offering intimacy this way. He's not used to holding out his hand and have someone take it in solidarity, like in equality with him, rather than domination over him or like power struggle with him. And so, as I understand it, as I've come to understand, there is a pretty active Angel, Dust, and Husk shipping community. Husker, I think. Angel Husker? Something like that. It has a hashtag, I'm sure. Which, like, I completely understand. Like, because this scene especially, you can definitely read this from a romantic perspective that, like, Husk is the first person who offers Angel the kind of intimacy that he actually needs, rather than the kind of intimacy that the selfish kind of intimacy that Valentino gives, where it's like, I'm gonna take everything from you that I can possibly get, try and take what you can get from me as well, like this transactional. So you get these little moments of like Angel sort of going like a little schoolgirl almost, like sort of like holding hands with someone all of a sudden is like a slightly scary thing, right? A slightly vulnerable thing in a way that you wouldn't expect from someone who's like default mode of physical engagement with other people is to suck their dick. But holding hands all of a sudden is this thing that gets him, right? That's that like makes his heart flutter a little bit. You know, in the way that like vulnerability and intimacy does. Same thing here. Husk takes his hand, like pulls on him to dance, and you can see the expression on Angel Dust's face. Like there's that little flash of like, oh, like this little flash of uncertainty before he trusts, right? And gives in and agrees to be there in the space with Husk in the way that Husk wants him to be, which is just to be there, right? And that's just the choreography and the character animation of Angel and Husk in this moment. Especially Angel's acting gets so much of his interiority across in terms of how he's feeling in this moment, what he's going through, like why his emotions are reacting the way that they are. It's very well judged. It's very well acted. And again, the song itself is also, because like it is, again, from a storytelling narrative perspective, very, very clever and very well observed that what Husker gives Angel in this moment isn't validation, it isn't platitudes, it isn't everything, nothing's wrong with you, everything's fine, you're a good person. He gives you, no, you're fucked up, you're a coked up dick sucking hoe. Yeah, sure, and that's fine, that's cool, it's fine by me. You're fucked up, you've done a bunch of wrong shit, but as the theme of the central theme of the show is, you still deserve a second chance, though. You still deserve to have people who care for you, to be in a space with people who understand you and who want better things for you than what you have, rather than self-destruction as your only way out. Right? It's very well judged to have Husker just be like, yeah, you know what, I'm also fucked up. I am a gambling, cheating, loser piece of shit. Sit here with me and be a loser piece of shit with me. Dance with me for a bit. Just be here. Like that. Emotionally, I think that's a very, very well judged way to show Angel letting down his walls, not from people trying to validate his Angel Dust persona, not from people like telling him that he's beautiful and telling him that he's pretty and gorgeous and that he's amazing, because that's what everyone who has ever wanted something from Angel has told him, right? Like everyone who's ever wanted something from Angel has been like, oh my god, you're so beautiful, you're so gorgeous, you're so glamorous, you're so perfect, you're so hot, you're so sexy. Everyone who's ever wanted something from him has told Angel Dust those things. And Husk doesn't. Like, Husk doesn't flatter him. He just sees him. And that's good. I think that's really fucking good. And that, like, the choreography between the two of them, also, again, props to the animators. these two characters have very different physicalities. Husk has those fucking wings and the tail and the giant eyebrows, and like Angel has multiple limbs to work with. Working out a choreography for these two people to dance with each other in a way that looks good, in a way that flows visually. That's like from a compositional, that means, for example, in this dance scene, you probably couldn't have Husk in front of Angel Dust. Husk needs to be behind Angel Dust, because otherwise the fucking wings would obscure so much of Angel Dust's body language that you'd kind of miss out on like the confusion and the like uncertainty that Angel Dust is showing in the start of this dance scene. So like there's that, and then the movements between the two of them need to be coordinated in such a way that like Angel Dust doesn't, for example, have to stoop all the time in order to like reach where Husk's arms are taking. Like there's a lot of choreography, there's a lot of coordination that goes into making this shit work, and I just want to compliment the animators on making it work and making it look so fucking smooth, making it look so good, because that's fucking hard. Like, and keeping all of these fucking body parts straight while you're doing it is like, and also using them like that little flourish right there, right? Right, the thing that Husk does when he like jumps back and how like he spreads his arms out. Like, to have the wings aid in that gesture, like poke up the wings, flap them out, use all the feathers to really give the thing that like that big spread. That's another good little thing. Like that's using the body parts of an unusual character to aid in the expression. That's good animation. That's just baseline, good, competent, well done animation. So I wanted to get that in there also, because like by the time we got to Loser Baby, when I was recording the reaction, I was a little bit in a situation of like, oh shit, I kind of want like, I know I ended up talking for a long time regardless, but I was in the situation of like I didn't want to, I kind of wanted it to be over with so I could go take a minute for myself. So I just wanted to come back and gush a little bit about some of the character animation that's happening in this song, and the way that like the relationship between Angel Dust and Husker is negotiated physically, because it's really fucking well done. And the same thing for the Poison music video. Like the editing in the Poison music video I want to call out, because it's very rapid. Like there's a lot of very fast editing that happens in this thing, and yet the storytelling is extremely clear. Right? Like, there's a lot of fast cuts that happens in this thing, and yet the storytelling is clean. The storytelling is, like, the narrative of what's happening is clear. It's very good, right? So I've framed my criticisms. I've made my criticism that Hazbin Hotel indulges in some cultural tropes that are problematic, right? That's a thing that happens, which is not an attempt. Again, I want to specify this a lot because people have terrible literacy online, which is not an attempt to cancel the show. It's not an attempt to say that you're evil or homophobic or that the show is any of those things, because the show is clearly taking Angel Dust's side, right? Like, it's clearly trying to say that the thing the show is clearly trying to say is that, hey, people should not be abused, right? That's the message the show is trying to send, and there's nothing evil about that. Like, that's what it's trying to get at. It's just the semiotics of the tools that it uses to get there have a context. So I framed my criticisms. I have done my praising of some of my favorite bits of the episode. And with that out of my system, I feel a little bit better. Because like, again, I think I said this during the initial reaction, the biggest criticism I can give to a piece of media is that it affects me, right? Like, the worst media in the universe, the shittiest media on the face of the earth, is the stuff that doesn't do anything. The stuff that doesn't make you blink or twitch an eyebrow or react, that just sits on a second monitor and plays, or on a TV in the background while everyone is doing something else without anyone paying attention or being affected or touched by it in the least way. That's the worst media on earth. Like, and even shitty media is sometimes preferable to that. But this is good. Like, I think there's a lot of heart. There's a lot of earnest good intent in Hazbin Hotel. And a lot of empathy and understanding for its characters, which I think is important. Especially as a counterpoint to the problems that I was talking about, right? So yeah, that was 45 extra minutes of that. Oh, good grief. But now I think I can put this to bed. Bye.